All right, well, hey, we're going to get started. Thank you all so much for taking the time out of your conference schedule to spend a few minutes with us. We're going to talk in a little bit more detail here, but when integration costs more than innovation, somewhere along the line, healthcare and healthcare organizations were forced into a trap of sorts that ended up being more akin to a Rube Goldberg contraption as far as their integrations and their stack as it relates to vendor management, interoperability goals, business alignment, things that they're trying to accomplish within their organization. And ultimately, it is relegated into a series of juggling. You don't know if one system's talking to the other, if that system is due for its own security issues and or patches, integration patterns, if you've got a new emerging opportunity within the national landscape or even within your own four walls, you're forced into a pattern that ultimately means, do I need to buy something new? That fragmentation trap's real. Ultimately, organizations end up managing these through a series of relationships, but we're going to zoom in a little bit on what that problem actually materializes. Yes, there's total cost of ownership, items to manage, and yes, there's things that identify obvious as problems, but the problems that are highlighted on the screen touch a little bit on how many different relationships these organizations are having to manage, each with its own contract, its overhead, and that ultimately means that if they've got one solution over here for a point-to-point integration, if they've got a different vendor over here for fax integration, if they've got a different vendor over here for HL7 and Fire, or if they want to adopt new things with some recent announcement by CMS or the like, those organizations are forced into a pattern where they've then got to figure out what their current systems can't do, won't do, and never intended to do, and then buy something new. Healthcare organizations are under immense financial pressure. And the organization Chime recently commissioned a survey specifically focusing on how many different CIOs knew that app rationalization was an opportunity for their organization to uncover cost savings. And because of that survey, 3/4 of them acknowledged that they absolutely know that app rationalization within their portfolio is a problem and they need to solve for it. And it's a real way to actually uncover savings in the organization. As a result of that survey, even though 3/4 of them realize that it's a problem, 44% of them, they were starting to plan something. 20% of them didn't even have a plan, and 16% of them were getting started. But at the end of the day, this conversation today is really just meant to zoom in a little bit on it, highlight some of those problems, but also give you some tactical takeaways. We've got a QR code at the end of the presentation. Would welcome you to scan it. It gives you an opportunity to evaluate a white paper where we zoom in on these topics in a little bit more of a practical, tactical way. The goal is to help you address these problems. So I'm going to take just a couple seconds here. I'll identify not just the problems that are highlighted here, but the hidden costs of this problem that also plagues organizations. So obviously, healthcare organizations managing those multiple vendors, separate contracts, separate vendors, decisions are made by different teams within the organization. Many organizations still operate with what's most important to them and their team, and sometimes the left hand doesn't talk to the right hand. And that isolation amongst the operational teams creates further friction in value realization for the organization. So the true cost, this is a wall of text. I'm not going to read each bullet verbatim, but I do want to take just a second to just kind of let you soak it in. I have a grandpa who's, here's your dad joke. I don't know who I was talking. I think it was Scott. I'm making good on my dad joke. This is actually a granddad joke maybe. My grandpa was from Texas and loved picking at us grandkids and would love to actually, whenever he could, randomly insert a question and make us really reflect on it. And he would ask specifically, he'd look at us and say, do you know how long it takes water to get from a giraffe's mouth to their stomach? Do you? Any takers? No, of course you don't. You only think about yourselves. That was constantly what he would do, is like pick on you like that. So, but this is kind of a real problem, right? Where healthcare technology and sales puts themselves in front of these organizations that are desperate to find a solution, and they need a partner. They need a thought partner. They need somebody who's going to lock arms with them and get to value. But instead, they kind of find themselves in a repeat pattern and a trap pattern where they've purchased a new thing with the promise of hope and the promise of relief, and then they end up in another contract and another vendor to manage. So I would challenge all of healthcare and all of healthcare tech to maybe think about the one on your left and your right instead of thinking about just yourselves as a giraffe and the water to the stomach. But that's really what this slide represents. Is it was laid out with good intentions, but these visible costs, license fees, et cetera, there's also many other hidden costs that are much more impactful to the org, but also a diagnostic nightmare. Multiple vendors, you don't know where it falls apart when something breaks. You've got tickets managing and moving between triage and causation. And these organizations are trying to innovate and feeling the pressure to keep up with the rest of healthcare in the market, while they're also still trying to keep the lights on and manage all of the things that they've already committed to. And so it takes that energy, it saps that energy from your resources, your technical resources, your innovative teams, and they're spending more time triaging and troubleshooting and trying to just keep everything talking to one another while still adopting the new thing, swatting at the gnats that are in their face, rather than actually getting you to a point of innovation edge and actually shipping product and shipping solutions and driving value for the organization. So opportunity cost, the big takeaway here, it's a massive line item, and every month an engineer maintaining some of that integration is time spent where a competitive feature isn't realized. So strategic alternatives, ultimately the organization's TCO framework. There's a way to approach this across these cost categories, but not just the ones on your invoice. Direct costs are easy to find, but the 4 categories that hide in plain sight kind of sit across engineering, ops, security, and product roadmaps. Ultimately, these opportunity costs, they create an underestimated realization of savings. So organizations that really do want to impact care and they want to make a difference for not only their providers, not only the users that experience their systems, but also the patients they're rendering care for. Patients are at the center of everything that healthcare is supposed to be about. And when you run these tight of margins, something's going to give. And that breaking point, I think we are at an point in the industry. And organizations are being forced now more than ever to kind of call the ball. They got to decide now, how are they going to innovate on a care model that has been long-standing, is aged, and won't last for the next several decades. We've got to make a decision now that will serve patients for the next 5 decades and longer. And so when you actually peel the layers back on these, and our goal with this entire session and this thought piece is really meant to give you really a framework, a set of tools. That white paper allows you to kind of do a Briggs-Meyer personality test for your organization, if you will. It's a scoring questionnaire within that white paper. You could start to map out effectively what are the things I can do today, what are the things that I can't do, and what are the things that I'm well positioned to do in the next near term as well as by the year end. So a couple of details here that will start to surface not only in the white paper, but we wanted to take a few minutes to just highlight is how can I take away, aside from your really cool giraffe joke, how can I take away something that allows me to help my organization? And we wanted to kind of bucket these into 3 alternatives, or at least 3 approaches. The first things that become abundantly clear as you dig into your TCO, your total cost of ownership, and you actually allow yourself to evaluate these paths that emerge, you start to identify what resonates most aligned to your current reality, but also what's going to get you to value sooner. That time to value window matters, and sometimes pressurizing events force that path in front of you rather than you having the luxury of choosing. So 1, 2, and 3 here highlighted on the screen. The status quo optimization, it's really best for those organizations that have legacy constraints. These organizations that they really don't have much of a choice. They got to maintain the multiple vendors, but how do they manage costs? How do they reduce costs if a solution path emerges and presents itself with one of your existing vendor relationships? That may be great, but maybe that vendor, because of just how they license or whatever the case may be, it honestly may be cost prohibitive. Just because something's technically viable doesn't mean it's financially wise. Yeah, there you go. So ultimately, these standardized integration patterns, they do emerge. There are solution paths that you can evaluate. And even in status quo optimization, you may be able to look at those maintenance of those multiple vendors, but then evaluate: can I do this particular solution with this vendor and have a better cost model than I could with a different vendor, as well as the selective consolidation. So these are organizations that are wanting to maintain some specialization. These organizations very well may have a slew of vendors, and honestly, likely much more than 5 or 7. This is, again, an aggregate average from smallest healthcare organizations up to large enterprises. But these organizations that have 5 to 7 vendors, that they just want to cut it in half. They want to look at the things that have been historically very expensive on their budget cycle, and they every year see what they approve and they ask for on budget, but then they look at that and they say, what are we actually getting out of it? What are we doing? Are we literally doing the same thing that we purchased it originally, but we've not actually expanded its use in any way, shape, or form? And that value proposition should continue to innovate. That value proposition should be something that matures with healthcare and not is stuck with like the one-trick pony inside of your 4 walls. So consolidating to 2 to 3 vendors, it allows for you to drive healthcare-based data exchange and healthcare-based innovations to a commodity wherever possible. From a mission statement, I would hope that organizations lean in and realize that if it's your grandma or if it's your loved one that's sitting on the other side of a misinformed or ill-informed workflow because the technology was not performant to empower the care providers that are rendering that care, then that's a challenge moment. That's a challenge moment for the industry. It's a challenge moment for the vendor, because ultimately it should be commoditized. Commodity services, wherever possible, is an important part of this particular path. But ultimately, retaining those specialized solutions where absolutely necessary, and then phasing in. Phase migrations play a big part in this, where you can start to get a lay of the land. You can look at when contracts expire. You can get a sense of how can I manage TCO, maybe not this year, but maybe in 14 months or whatever that might look like. So Path 3 starts to emerge for those organizations that are prioritizing innovation. They look at their landscape and they say, look, we got to get our cost of ownership down. It's a go, no-go moment. It may be even an existential threat for the organization, and they've got to decide, how can I take all of these other things, disparate technologies that may do one thing here and one thing here, but now I can actually consolidate this into a unified approach, where I can take a unified approach to my architecture and then also get a benefit that I'm actually striving for today, while positioning my organization to actually benefit from things that I know are coming. And those innovations should not be static, because you all know as well as I do, healthcare is constantly moving, and the catalyst for those things, the cycle is shrinking, and that window of time you have to solve for it is also shrinking. So here's the path forward. A few things. 1 through 5, you kind of climb the stairway to heaven. No, I'm just kidding. That's not. See, I did it again. I weaved in another dad joke. That was for you, Scott, specifically. But if you calculate your TCO, use the white paper that we put together. That's going to be helpful. If you then look at kind of what is the status quo, you got to have an inventory, a catalog of kind of what your current reality is. That vendor ecosystem very well may no longer serve your strategic initiatives, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're actually stuck. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a bunch of breakages. It very well may mean that your organization has just grown out and outsized your historical decisions. That's also okay. But evaluating consolidation, it becomes a really practical component of this. That comprehensive and consolidated approach allows for somebody that's looking at this and saying, how can I actually take consolidation seriously? Rather than this aspirational thing that I want to talk about or I heard about, how can I actually make it real for my physicians, for my organization, so that when the P&L happens the next time I review a budget cycle, I'm actually seeing that our app rationalization effort has actually equated to real value. We've actually executed against it, and now my organization is starting to reap the benefits of that. Prioritizing innovation over integration. When you free your team to actually realize that a consolidated technology strategy allows the organization to focus on those innovations, you actually will tap into the unrealized potential of all of that opportunity cost that has just been buried, and it's not reflective in a P&L. You're not going to see a line item that says, Travis spent 73 hours in the last 3 weeks trying to fix this old janky thing that we've been running for 30 years. Instead, you start to free that up, where you tap into the unrealized potential and the creative genius of your employment. And that status of just being kind of the status quo, you start to disrupt that. Rock the boat a little bit. Challenge the status quo. Prioritizing innovation over integration then allows you to then act strategically and with timing. Don't just talk about it, do it. It's one thing to come to the events. It's one thing to enjoy this incredible session that I've managed to stay on time with and even weave in a few dad jokes, but actually allow you to go home and say, hey, that thing that we actually talked about, let's actually start to get some stuff on the menu. Let's start looking at, in a real way, what are the small, measurable steps that we can start to take now? And that's where this last slide comes in. So here's the sizzle and the steak hidden behind the QR code. And I'll get my large bald head out of the way for those of you on this side so you can scan it. Ultimately, our hope is that when you take the content that's been put together, for those of you that don't know about No2, and I dove right into the content because I care very little about introducing myself, but my name is Travis White. I'm Senior Vice President for Solution Strategy at No2. Been a delight to be with you this afternoon. Thank you for giving up your power grain bowls and your sweet treats for those that were going to sneak them for this session. But No2 is a federally designated Qualified Health Information Network, a QHIN under TEFCA, but we're also a CMS-aligned network. So that single connection to full healthcare interop and one communication stack that enables infrastructure to actually achieve the goals that you're intending. That's really what No2 is all about. Our tagline says it all. Connect once, communicate everywhere. But scan the QR code, ask any questions you have. There are 2 minutes and 56 seconds if you have questions. I will even answer them if you ask them at 3 minutes. I will still be available. Our booth is right here, adjacent to the theater. Any of the No2 crew will be happy to answer your questions. I'm happy to nerd out with any fellow nerds if you've got questions. But really appreciate y'all taking the time today. Thank you again for taking a rest and enjoying the session, hopefully. Appreciate it.